everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be reading chapter 5. I know this is a long-awaited chapter. I'm sorry. I've been trying to get used to this whole digital or virtual learning, distance learning, new life of teaching, and it's been intense. So today I've been on 2 video calls with my students, which was absolutely wonderful. I loved seeing all their faces, and they were so excited to see one another, and that was just wonderful. And I had a couple kids that were like, Miss Baker, we're waiting on chapter 5. When are you going to put it up? So I'm sorry for the messy, crazy hair, and we're just in the treehouse. I'm hoping that we have enough daylight before I run out of light in here. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 5. It's the Whomping Willow. You can see the little picture there, chapter 5. This is another really long chapter, so I'm going to split it into 2. So let's go ahead and get started. The Whomping Willow. Don't forget, those of you, please make sure that if you want to be featured in my video, make sure that you are writing in the comments below the summary of the chapter that I read previously, and I will include you in my video. So it would be a lot of fun to be able to say, hey, I had a student submit this summary. This is what happened in the last video. But just so that you guys are familiar, in the end of chapter 4, they had gone by flu powder. That turned into be a disaster for Harry. He got lost, and then they traveled by flu powder back to the Weasleys' house. And I guess now they're getting ready to go back to Hogwarts. So, chapter 5, The Whomping Willow. The end of the summer vacation came too quickly for Harry's liking. He was looking forward to getting back to Hogwarts, but his month at the Burrow had been the happiest in his life. It was difficult not to feel jealous of Ron when he thought of the Dursleys and the sort of welcome that he could expect the next time he turned up on Privet Drive. On their last evening, Mrs. Weasley conjured up a sumptuous dinner that included all of Harry's favorite things, ending with a mouth-watering treacle pudding. Fred and George rounded off the evening with a display of filibuster fireworks. They filled the kitchen with red and blue stars that bounced from ceiling to wall for at least half an hour. Man, magical fireworks sound so much better than real fireworks. You can have them inside, and they can last up to 30 minutes. Man. Then it was time for the last mug of hot chocolate in bed. It took a long while to get started next morning. They were up at dawn, but somehow they still seemed to have a great deal to do. Mrs. Weasley dashed about in a bad mood, looking for spare socks and quills. People kept colliding on the stairs, half dressed with bits of toast in their hands. Mr. Weasley nearly broke his neck tripping over a stray chicken and crossing the yard carrying Ginny's trunk to the car. Harry could see how 8 people, 6 large trunks, 2 owls, and a rat were going to fit in the small Ford Anglia. He had reckoned, of course, without a special feature that Mr. Weasley had added. Not a word to Molly, he whispered to Harry as he opened the trunk and showed him how it had magically expanded so that all the luggage fit easily. When at last they were all in the car, Mrs. Weasley glanced into the back seat where Ron, Harry, Fred, George, and Percy were all sitting comfortably side by side and said, "Muggles do know more than we give them credit for, don't they?" She and Ginny got into the front seat, which had stretched to resemble a park bench. I mean, you'd never know it was this roomy from the outside, would you? Mr. Weasley started up the engine and they trundled out of the yard, Harry turning back for a last look at the house. He barely had time to wonder when he'd see it again when they were back. George had forgotten a box of filibuster fireworks. 5 minutes after that, they skidded to a halt in the yard, and Fred could run after his broomstick. They had almost reached the highway when Jenny shrieked that she had left her diary. By that time, they were clambering back into the car. They were running very late, and their tempers were running high. Does that happen to anybody else? You're running out the door late, and everybody's just super flustered and kind of a little on edge. Yeah, I think we can relate to that. Mr. Weasley glanced at his watch and then at his wife. Molly, dear, no, Arthur. No one would see. This little button here and the invisibility booster I installed, that would get us up into the air. Then we'd fly above the clouds. We'd be there in 10 minutes and no one would be any wiser. I said no, Arthur, not in broad daylight. They reached King's Cross in 11:15. Mr. Weasley dashed across the road to get trolleys for their trunks, and they hurried into the station. Harry had caught the Hogwarts Express the previous year. The tricky part was getting onto platform 9 3/4, which wasn't visible to the Muggle's eye. What you had to do was walk through a solid barrier dividing platform 9 and 10. It didn't hurt, but it had to be done carefully so that none of the Muggles noticed you vanishing. Just kind of tricky, huh? Percy strode briskly forward and vanished. Mr. Weasley went next. Fred and George followed. I'll take Ginny, and you two come right after us, Mrs. Weasley told Harry and Ron, grabbing Ginny's hand and setting off. In a blink of an eye, they were gone. Let's go together. We've only got a minute, said Ron to Harry. Harry made sure that Hedwig's cage was safely wedged on top of his trunk and wheeled the trolley around to face the barrier. He felt perfectly confident. This wasn't nearly as uncomfortable as using flue powder. Both of them bent low over the handles on their trolleys and walked purposefully toward the barrier, gathering speed. A few feet away from it, they broke into a run and crash! Both trolleys hit the barrier, bounced backwards. Ron's trunk fell off with a loud thump, and Harry was knocked to his feet, and Hedwig's cage bounced onto the shiny floor. They rolled away, shrieking indignantly. People all around were stared and guarded, and the guards nearby yelled, "What in blazes do you think you're doing?" Lost control of the trolleys, Harry gasped, clutching his ribs as he got up. Ron ran to pick up Hedwig, who was causing such a scene that there was a lot of muttering about cruelty to animals from the surrounding crowd. Why can't we get through? Harry hissed to Ron. I don't know. Ron looked wildly around, and a dozen curious people were still watching them. We're going to miss the train, Ron whispered. I don't understand. Why is the gateway sealed itself? Harry looked at the giant clock with a sickening feeling in the pit of his stomach. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. He wheeled his trolley forward cautiously until he was right against the barrier and pushed with all his might, and the metal remained solid. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. It's gone, said Ron, sounding stunned. The train's left. What if Mom and Dad can't get back through to us? Have you got any Muggle money? Harry gave a hollow laugh. The Dursleys haven't given me pocket money in about 6 years. Ron pressed his ear to the cold barrier. Can't hear a thing, he said tensely. What are we gonna do? I don't know how long it'll take Mom and Dad to get back to us. They looked around and people were still watching them, mainly because of Hedwig's continued screeches. I think we'd better go and wait by the car, said Harry. We're attracting too much attention. Harry, said Ron, his eyes gleaming. The car! What about it? We could fly the car to Hogwarts. But I thought, we're stuck, right? And we've got to get to school, haven't we? And even underage wizards are allowed to use magic if it's a real emergency, Section 19 or something in the restriction of thingy. But your Mom and Dad, said Harry, pushing against the barrier in a vain hope that it would give way. How will they get home? They don't need a car, said Ron impatiently. They know how to apparate. Just vanish and reappear at home. They only bother with flu powder and the car because we're underage and not allowed to apparate yet. Harry's feeling of panic turned suddenly into excitement. Can you fly it? No problem, said Ron, wheeling the trolley around to face the exit. Come on, let's go. If we hurry, we'll be able to follow the Hogwarts Express. Would be kind of fun. Fly a car over a train to a magical school. I like this. And they marched off through a crowd of curious muggles, out of the station and back onto the side road where the old Ford Anglia was parked. Ron unlocked the cavernous trunk with a series of taps from his wand. They heaved their luggage back in, put Hedwig on the back seat, and got into the front. Check that no one's watching, said Ron, starting the ignition with another tap of his wand, and Harry stuck his head out the window. Traffic was rumbling along the main road ahead, but their street was empty. Okay, he said. Ron pressed the tiny silver button on the dashboard, and the car around them vanished, and so did they. Harry could feel the seat vibrating beneath him, hear the engine, and feel his hands on his knees and his glasses on his nose. But for all that he could see, he had become a pair of eyeballs floating a few feet above the ground in a dingy street full of parked cars. Weird, just eyeballs. That's it. Let's go, said Ron's voice from his right. And the ground of the dirty buildings on either side fell away, dropping out of sight, and the car rose. In seconds, the whole of London lay smoky and glittery below them. Then there was a popping noise, and the car, Harry and Ron, reappeared. Uh-oh, said Ron, jabbing the invisibility booster. It's faulty. Both of them pummeled it, and the car vanished. Then it flickered back again. Hold on, Ron yelled, and he slammed his foot on the accelerator. And they shot straight into the low, woolly clouds, and everything turned dull and foggy. Now what? Said Harry, blinking as a solid mass of clouds pressing in against them from all sides. We need to see the train to know what direction to go in, said Ron. Dip back down again, quickly. They dropped back beneath the clouds and twisted around in their seats, squinting to the ground. I can see it, Harry yelled. Right ahead, there. The Hogwarts Express was streaking along below them like a scarlet snake. Due north, said Ron, checking the compass on the dashboard. Okay, we'll just have to check it every half hour or so. Hold on. And they shot up through the clouds, and a minute later they burst into a blaze of sunlight. It was a different world. The wheels in the car skimmed the sea of fluffy clouds, and the sky was a bright and endless blue under a blinding white sun. All we've got to worry about now are airplanes, said Ron. And they looked at each other and started to laugh for a long time, and they couldn't stop. That ever happen with your friend? Like something really silly happens, but it's only a joke between you two, and then you just sit there and laugh about it forever, and you just can't stop laughing? Yeah. I once got kicked out of a class for that. It was as though they had plunged into a fabulous dream. This, thought Harry, was surely the only way to travel, past swirls and turrets of snowy clouds, in a car full of hot, bright sunlight, with a fat pack of toffees and in the glove compartment, and the prospect of seeing Fred's and George's jealous faces when they landed smoothly and spectacularly on the sweeping lawn in front of Hogwarts Castle. They made regular checks of the train, and they flew further and further north, each dip below the clouds showing them a different view. London was soon far behind them, replaced with the neat green fields that gave way to turn to wide, purplish moors, a great city alive with cars like multicolored ant villages with tiny toy churches. I just love how she describes that. So much color and similes to cars like multicolored ants. That's just so neat. Several uneventful hours later, however, Harry had to admit that some of the fun was wearing off. The toffees had made them extremely thirsty, and they had nothing to drink. He and Ron had pulled off their sweaters, but Harry's t-shirt was sticking to the back of his seat, and his glasses kept sliding down the end of his sweaty nose. He had stopped noticing the fantastic cloud shapes and now was thinking longingly of the train miles below, where they could buy ice-cold pumpkin juice from a trolley pushed by a plump witch. Why hadn't they been able to get onto the platform 9 3/4? Can't be much further, can it? Croaked Ron, hours later still, as the sun started to sink into the floor of the clouds, straining it a deep pink. Ready for another check on the train? It was still right below them, winding its way past snow-capped mountains. It was much darker beneath the canopy of clouds. Ron put his foot on the accelerator and drove them upward again. But as he did so, the engine began to whine. Harry and Ron exchanged nervous glances. It's probably just tired, said Ron. It's never been this far before. And they both pretended not to notice the whining growing louder and louder. And as the sky became steadily darker, stars were blossoming in the blackness. Stars were blossoming in the blackness. Instead of the stars were coming out. I love that. Harry pulled his sweater back on, trying to ignore the windshield wipers were now waving feebly through as though in protest. Not far, said Ron. More to the car than to Harry. Not far now. And he patted the dashboard nervously. When he flew back beneath the clouds, and a little while later, they had to squint in the darkness to see a landmark that they knew. There, Harry shouted, making Ron and Hedwig jump. Straight ahead, silhouetted in the dark horizon, high off the cliff over the lake, stood the many turrets and towers of Hogwarts Castle. But the car began to shudder again, and was losing speed. Come on, Ron said cajolingly. Give the steering wheel a little shake. Nearly there, come on. And the engine groaned. Narrow jets of steam were issued from the underside of the hood, and Harry found himself gripping the edges of the seat very hard as they flew toward the lake. The car gave a nasty wobble, and glancing out his window, Harry saw the smooth, black, glassy surface of the water a mile below. Ron's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and the car wobbled again. They were over the lake, and the castle was right ahead. Ron put his foot down, and there was a loud clunk and a sputter, and the engine died completely. Uh-oh, said Ron into the silence, and the nose of the car dipped, and they were falling, gathering speed, heading straight for the solid castle wall. No, Ron yelled, swinging the steering wheel around, and they missed the dark stone wall by inches. As the car turned in the great arc, soaring over the dark greenhouses, and then the vegetable patch, and then over the black lawns, losing altitude all the time. Ron let go of the steering wheel completely and pulled his wand out of his back pocket. Stop! Stop! He yelled, whacking the dashboard with the windshield, but they were still plummeting, the ground flying up toward them. Watch out for that tree! Harry bellowed, lunging for the steering wheel, but too late. Crunch! With an ear-splitting bang of metal on wood, they hit the thick tree trunk and dropped to the ground with a heavy jolt. Steam was billowing from under the crumpled hood. Hedwig was shrieking in terror, and a golf ball-sized lump was throbbing on Harry's head where he had hit the windshield. And to his right, Ron let out a low, despairing groan. Are you okay? Harry said urgently. My wand, said Ron in a shaky voice. Look at my wand. It had snapped almost in two, and the tip was dangling limply, held on just by a few splinters. Harry opened his mouth to say that he was sure that they'd be able to mend it up at the school, but he never even got started. At that very moment, something hit the side of the car with the force of a charging bull that sending him lurching sideways into Ron, just as an equally heavy blow hit the roof. All right, and so that's where we're going to stop today. So I'm going to record the rest of the chapter tomorrow, so I will hopefully get that posted again tomorrow afternoon. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I apologize for the darkness, but I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter, and we'll pick it up again later in the next video. So until then, guys, don't forget, send me your summaries in the comments below, and like this video, make sure you smash the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you can stay informed when I post new videos. Until then, you guys stay safe and keep on reading. Bye, guys.